and welcome to a discussion on the topic religion and modernity. At the very outset, I would like to make a point that the study of religion, particularly the various aspects of secularization, is centered around the evolution of society from the pre-modern to the modern era. Not surprisingly, this task is quite difficult and overwhelming. Getting down to the basics of the definition, modernity can be defined as the process which indicates certain socio-cultural norms, attitudes and practices that surfaced in post-medieval Europe and gradually continued with its expanse in other parts of the world. As such, the process is more dynamic than any previous social order, precisely because it brings in its wake many new traits. It involves a plethora of institutions which is grounded in the future rather than in the past, and therefore it becomes obvious that the amelioration of religion as well as of secularization becomes the focal point of this process, that is of modernity. In order to analyze the relationship between religion and modernity, it is necessary to take into account the growing amount of sociological work in this sphere. We have an interesting point to consider here. You see, religion did not fade into oblivion with the passage of time. Rather, we have witnessed the emergence of new forms of religious beliefs, particularly among the youth who are considered less religious than their elderly counterparts and are believed to have little connection to traditional religious beliefs. Studies have shown that in countries such as Italy, Poland and Ireland, where the church continued to exercise a dominating influence in all aspects of people's lives, the youth started vehemently rebelling against such indoctrinations and practices. This was in contrast to societies where the influence of church was declining, leading to the emergence of a belief in afterlife and an immanent God. We are not yet sure as to whether these transformations are permanent or not. However, it remains an important phenomenon to devote our attention to. One thing that can be stated is that as the sense of belonging is reduced, belief on the other hand starts growing stronger, and not surprisingly, new ideas are welcomed by liberated believers. I take this opportunity to mention the theoretical discourses, which are basically divided into two groups. The first one is grounded in the prevalent sociology of religion and at the same time takes into account its theoretical tendency. The second one involves those sociologists and thinkers who operate within mainstream sociology, but at the same time they are aware of the existence of religion in modern societies. Let me speak of James Beckford first. Beckford, in his work Religion and Industrial Society, has beautifully illustrated the point that there has not been much of an interaction between the two types of theoretical practices. The predominant theme in his book was the insulation and isolation of the sociology of religion from the mainstream discipline. As is evident, these factors have relegated the religious aspect of social life to a marginal position and sidetracked its importance in the minds of most sociologists. Even though some of the religious concepts propounded by sociologists have been accepted by religious actors, we can hardly witness any change in the process. In yet another of his book titled Social Theory and Religion, Beckford provides a constructivist approach to the analysis of religion. He explains the process whereby the meaning of the category of religion is in various situations intuited, asserted, doubted, challenged, rejected, substituted, recast, and so on. An application of this idea is seen in the study of phenomena like secularization, globalization, etc. As the amount of articles and writings started increasing from the mid 1990s, Beckford, along with John Wallis, compiled it into a single edition. Other works include those done by Paul Hillas titled Religion, Modernity and Post-Modernity, which is a collection of conference papers. He tried to decipher the relationship between the diverse forms of religious life prevalent in the modern and post-modern societies, as well as their relationship to culture. In Religion and Modern Times, Hillas and Woodhead try to unite the innumerable authors working on the topic of religion. Conflict is unavoidable between themes like secularization and sacralization, between God without and God within, between exclusivist rejections and liberal universalisms, between increasing privatizations and blooming political militancy. However, as the diverse religious groups and processes try to adjust themselves in the society, they are bound to exist side by side, even though they are firmly opposed to each other. Thus, we can see a society characterized by both secularization and sacralization. Let me also speak of some other important sociologists who also concern themselves within the idea of religion. Some of the names that you all must remember are Barger, Luckman and Lohmann, who were social theorists of mid-post-war decades. Among the more recent theorists, we have Brian Turner and Ernst Gellner. Even though Turner presents a theoretical analysis, Gellner provides an essay in which he tries to analyze Islam at the same time criticizing postmodernism. A proponent and staunch supporter of liberalism, he tries to highlight the future of religion successful in keeping at bay both postmodernity and fundamentalism. Others believe that religion should not occupy the focal point. About fundamentalism, Anthony Giddens writes that fundamentalism is nothing but a reaffirmation of existential security connected to tradition in a traditional sense. This argument is grounded in the nature of modernity along with its concomitant insecurity. On the other hand, Bauman's essay titled Postmodern Religion recognizes the diverse trends existing between people, which is in turn reflected in their attitudes. Like I have said before, fundamentalism is depicted as a postmodern form of religion, recognizing the adversities associated with postmodern life. Thus, the fundamentalist is not only purged of sin, but also from the task of choosing. A refreshing change is brought about by the acceptance of religion within the ambit of sociology. Instead of being viewed as a way of becoming modern, religion is accepted as an opium for the people, assisting them in grappling with the uncertainties associated with the postmodern lifestyle. No wonder fundamentalists are preoccupied with this concept. Such questions and implications modernity brings in its wake have compelled sociologists to broaden their horizons and open up new avenues in the discipline. It is imperative to take into consideration European publications, as it was believed that it was in post-medieval Europe that the process of modernity initiated, leading to its subsequent development in different parts of the world. In Europe, the exceptional case, the first chapter is devoted to highlighting the characteristics of religion in modern Europe and the existence of diverse forms in different parts of the continent. In the last chapter, the same question is given attention to, but with a completely contrasting viewpoint. Here, Europe is considered from without rather than from within. That is, it focuses on the traits which are absent in the European society rather than those which are prevalent, taking into its analysis only Christian societies. It is quite obvious that this comparison would have been more contrasting had the Muslim and Hindu societies been considered. In stark contrast to the US, European churches are devoted towards the amelioration of the public rather than having a materialistic aim. As a result, Pentecostalism has not spread its branches in Europe, unlike Latin America. The notion of reversed mission is introduced by Africa, a belief that a European is not a receiver but a sender in religious matters. Suffice it to say, different countries have shown diverse attitudes. The growth of Pentecostalism and nature of Catholicism indicate a growing absorption with religious life in Philippines. Similarly, South Korea has witnessed the simultaneous development of both modernization and religious life. Even Christianity and Buddhism started spreading its wings steadfastly. However, these parameters did not persist, and by the turn of the millennium, new forms of sociological questions had arisen. 2 points must be internalized here. First, it is not compulsory for the familiar to become the norm. Secondly, the fact that new ideas are rejected on the basis of value judgments should be given equal importance. Religious beliefs in Europe differ from those prevailing in other parts of the Christian world. Some believe that the religious experiences of the people residing in this part of the world need no changes as they are similar. Others are of the opinion that these changes should not be allowed to occur because these lead to numerous problems. In spite of these differences, all are preoccupied with the need for providing an appropriate explanation for these self-established differences. My discussion on this part would remain incomplete if I do not mention two very important research works. The first one had been carried out by Ronald Engelhardt and his team in the University of Michigan. He has taken data from the World Health Survey to provide an empirical analysis of the aspects of modernization theory. The other has been conducted by Shmuel Eisenstadt at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, where he has given a theoretical analysis. Mention of Eisenstadt shall be made a number of times in this discussion, as his is an important contribution in the field of modernity. For the time being, Keep in mind that Eisenstadt was responsible for providing the very important and dynamic concept of multiple modernities. He uses data collected from all corners of the world centered around contrasting cases. This is an opposition to the existing theories which were primarily centered around the modernization process. The case studies have been published in Daedalus, a journal belonging to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and as such has invoked the intellectual capabilities of the people, resulting in widespread discussion on this topic. I will talk of his contributions even later on. Well, you might be aware of the fact that ideology is central to the theory of modernization. To elaborate, let me say that the capitalist mode of production with its political, social and cultural changes were necessary for development, and so it was felt that traditional values prevalent in developing societies should be discarded as they came in the way of capitalism and modernization. Though this view was widespread in the post-war world, it later faced severe opposition, especially by those who had done an analysis of not so modernized societies. Thus, we can say that the global inequalities stemmed from the capitalist system aimed at making profits at the expenses of others, although the view was contested by many. Now, before I start off straight with stages of modernization, let me first make a point about economy in this regard. You see, the relationship between economy and other aspects of society is a debatable topic. Some theorists believe in the association of economy with changes in culture, social and political lives, while other dependency theorists believe that this relationship is random. In this context, let me now talk about the two stages that characterized modernization. The first being the transformation from a pre-industrial economy to an industrial economy, and the second being the post-industrial system characterized by service-based, information-oriented knowledge economy. It does not come as a surprise that such changes in economy are followed by subsequent changes in the values, beliefs and norms of society. But these may not follow the dictates of earlier modernist theories, because what we found today is modern societies, instead of moving towards a technical, rationalized, mechanical and social environment, are aiming at improvement of the quality and standard of life. In other words, the emphasis was shifted from quality of life to post-materialist values. In addition, a growing interest in religious beliefs and spiritual aspects have been displayed by emerging societies, which does not always gets reflected in their institutional commitment. Here, let me speak of Norris and Engelhardt. Norris and Engelhardt validate two statements. First is the paradoxical attitude in society, where on the one hand people in post-industrial societies are becoming secular in their beliefs and religious practices, and on the other the proportion of people adhering to orthodox and traditional forms of religion are rising too. What has been found is that secularization has become directly proportional to the degree of human development and the inequalities persistent in the economy. But it must also be remembered that this viewpoint is self-limiting and is rebutted by many sociologists. thereby making it explicit that as society progresses, the proportion of people adhering to traditional religious beliefs grows exponentially. Second is the variety existing in nations undergoing modernization, another important criterion. With most of the nations adhering to capitalist mode of production, the pathways in each case are distinct. The emerging systems reflect religious backgrounds like Protestantism, Catholicism, Islam and Confucianism with their respective value systems. These post-industrial forms are inseparable with coherent cultural shifts, and the distinctions are revealed in all societies, irrespective of their economic affiliation. Thus, the economic forces end up increasing the gap between them, although the forces try to push the diverse societies in the same direction. Sadly, it becomes uncertain whether a unified culture would arise anytime soon. You might remember that I have already mentioned about Eisenstadt, the one who presents the facet of multiple modernity, previously explored by none. What Eisenstadt did was he studied the condition of the modern era along with its accompanying distinctiveness. While the classical sociological theorists like Marx, Durkheim and Weber and many others believed that Europe is at the central point of the process of modernization, and that traits of modernity prevalent in Europe would spread to the rest of the world, which would lose itself in the entanglement of its web. Eisenstadt, on the other hand, is against the idea that Europe is the epicenter of modernization and that all societies reflect traits of modernization only after Europe. According to him, the most apt way of comprehending the past and present of modernity is through visual images of it as a story of continual constitution and reconstitution of a multiplicity of cultural programs. Basically, modernity involves a radical transformation of society through human effort as hitherto believed. But there are contradictory notions as well. Particularly speaking, there is even a greater amount of contradictions visible in the cultural and institutional fields, more so as modernization advances and spreads in other countries. Thus, it is correctly assumed that it is diversity that is integral to the process of modernization. What we see is that multiple modernizations continue to expand under circumstances that are constantly adapting and readapting to the prevalent conditions. Despite everything, emerging actors, institutions and organizations are prepared to take up the responsibility of the problems that bother the modern world. In addition, the various strands of religion and religious movements can be accommodated in the diverse aspects of modernity. These forms of modernity are like the various forms of religion. Daedalus, about which I already mentioned, offers Christian, Muslim, Hindu and Confucian instances. For example, if we are to speak of Islam, the work of Turkish sociologist Nilofar Gole can be referred to. Gole says that modernity is ever changing and allows room for its own correction. And perhaps this is why with new and emergent forms of Islam, religion there has become a self-correctional instrument. Even If we consider other non-Western contexts, we can find that modernity is not simply rejected or readopted today, but is continuously and critically as well as creatively being reappropriated by rising religious practices. In conclusion, all I would like to encapsulate is that the idea of modernity as was rather as is prevalent in Europe is quite different, as has been explicated by a range of theoretical and empirical analysis. And secondly, and the most important, these different types are not opposed to each other, rather they exist as part of a larger whole. You see, Europe is not a prototype of modernity, and therefore European scholars should, besides taking into consideration their own nation and its development, must also explore and examine the other types of newly emerging or already modernized societies. The fact that discussion on modernity remains incomplete without a one on religion should also be one of the perspectives, and one should not simply discard religious parameters for the sake of considering it as barriers to technological or rather developments. With this, we come to an end of the discussion on religion and modernity. Thank you for attending the lecture. We shall meet again in some other discussion on some other module. Thank you once more.